be able to connect with you in a live situation and provide always just value for you guys as well, because I'm just so grateful so that you're here. So thank you so much. So yeah, this is going to be the first one in a series of 4 live line and wash classes. And the idea is that in each of these live line and wash classes, we're going to be working on a greeting card design. I thought this would be a great idea because not only are we practicing our drawing and watercolor together, but we're also going to end up with something that we can give away to our loved ones, to our friends this holiday season. Because it's like, what is better than giving away artwork that you created with your own 2 hands? And also, if you actually write something inside that greeting card or behind that greeting card, however you decide to, like, whatever format of greeting card you decide to do, what is better than that, writing an actual personalized note for that loved one or friend? It's an amazing gift. And so, yeah, we're building our skills. I'm keeping all of these beginner friendly, relatively simple, so that everyone can join. And so, yeah, hope that makes sense. It's great to see you guys here. Hi, Chrissy, Oregon, amazing. Barb, Indiana, so cool. Gail, hi, Gail. So yeah. Anyway, okay, so I hope that makes sense. If you guys have any questions at all throughout this session, please feel free to use the chat. I'm here to help you guys, and I'm always super transparent, and I like sharing it. I love being a teacher and just sharing what I know to do, which is art and drawing and painting. It's what I know. I'm pretty bad at everything else, but this is what I know, and it's what I like sharing with the world. Okay, so let's jump right in. Okay, so here on the upper, what is it, left? I don't even know if you're seeing me the same way that I'm seeing this on screen, or if it's like flipped. But right here on this upper corner here, I am sharing the outline drawing of these little bells with a bow and some greenery and a few sprinkled berries sprinkled around. And this is a design that I came up with yesterday. And if you're interested, what I like doing is I like grabbing a folder, looking up a few different reference photos of different types of bells and Christmas greenery and like ribbons and bows and whatever. And then what I do is I observe all of those reference photos, and then I come up with my own original design using elements and like positionings and like stuff like that I like from different photos. I bring everything together into my own little composition. And as I said, I did want to keep this relatively simple so that I can explain how to draw this step by step, even for beginners, and we can get this done together. Now, I will say, if you're just getting started with drawing and sketching, it's not good to be erasing too much on your watercolor paper, which is what we're going to be using today because we're working with watercolor. So, what I would recommend is, if you're just getting started with drawing and sketching, try to sketch this. I actually have my sketchbook with me right here. Sketch this on a sketchbook or a separate sheet of drawing paper, or even printing paper, whatever it is that you have on hand. And then once you're comfortable, you can actually sketch it on your watercolor sheet. And this way, there is less of a chance that you'll be erasing a lot. And also, when we're just getting started, we tend to draw we press down a lot, and our drawing is like super dark. And then even if you erase you can still see those lines, and it just becomes very messy. And the thing is that when you erase too much on your watercolor paper, it's going to damage the paper. And when you draw too dark, you're going to see those lines through your watercolor. So whenever I am going to be drawing anything that I don't have, even me, like I have been drawing for so many years, and I feel like I have advanced my skills to a certain level, whenever I'm going to be drawing something that I don't have much practice drawing, I would rather sketch separately on a separate drawing paper or sketchbook and transfer that onto my watercolor sheet, or at least have that practice in before drawing it on my watercolor sheet. So I just wanted to get that out there. Okay. Hope that that makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions. And finally, yes, my Patreon members from the $6 and $15 tiers are the ones who are choosing the themes for each of these classes. What I am doing every Tuesday is I am sending out a poll to my Patreon members with 3 different options. And one of the options for this week was bells and leaves or greens. And this is the one that won. And so that is why I prepared this little composition so that we can work with this today. Okay. And if you're a Patreon member, hi everyone. It's super cool to see you here. And if you have any questions on anything, let me know. Okay. All right, so I think that that is all. Let me go ahead and share my desk or my other little camera with you so that I can share about my supplies and we can jump right in. Okay, let me go ahead and remove this for a moment and change to my other little camera. Okay, cool. Let me turn this on and move to the right a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to be working on this sheet of cold pressed watercolor paper. This is paper from Bao Hong. I buy this via Amazon. Of course, I do live in Mexico, so sometimes we have access to different brands and stuff via Amazon. But this is what I'm using today, and I've been pleasantly surprised with this paper. Okay. I also love Arches, and the texture of this cold press paper is very similar to Arches cold press. Okay, just as an FYI, it's sturdy like Arches 140-pound cold pressed. And what I will be doing today is I will be working on the back because this is a little bit less textured. Why am I doing this? Because I am bringing in a drawing pen. And if I were to work on this side of my watercolor paper, it's the tooth of this cold press paper is going to make it so that my drawing pen is constantly skipping and my lines break just a little bit too much for my liking. So you could always use, of course, hot press watercolor paper, which is not as textured. It's the smoothest type of watercolor paper. That is also an excellent option for line and wash. Whenever I am bringing in a drawing medium, say it's colored pencils or a drawing pen or whatever it is like that, I would rather use paper that is a little bit less textured, but this is just what I have in my studio right now. When it comes to my drawing pen, I'm going to be using this. I've really been enjoying these Unipin fine liners from Mitsubishi Pencil Co. I get everything via Amazon, almost everything. Okay, everything that you see here, I get via Amazon. This is, for anyone who is curious, 0.5 tip size, and this is just what they call a technical drawing pen. It's not a brush pen or a marker or anything fancy like that. This just is a technical drawing pen, okay? When it comes to my pencil work, because we will be starting this in pencil, this is what I do, okay? This is my process in terms of the steps and how I always start my line and wash with pencil, or at least I always start with at least basic general shapes with pencil, and then I jump in with my pen, and then I do my watercolor. Okay, this is just how I do it. But it's also helpful for beginners because since we're starting in pencil first, you can erase and improve your drawing or whatever you need to do before moving on to the drawing pen and more permanent mediums, all right? Okay, so in terms of my sketching supplies or my pencils, this is an HB pencil and this is a 2B pencil. I would highly recommend creating your preliminary sketch using your HB drawing pencil because this is going to help you keep your drawing light and clean. The softer you get with your pencil grades, the smudgier the graphite, the darker the lines, and the harder it's going to be to erase. Personally, I don't like seeing my pencil work through the watercolor. Lots of artists do. There is no right or wrong. But I find that the smudgier the pencil I use, the less vibrant the colors, because the graphite starts intermixing with the paint, and then you arrive at like more muted, desaturated colors. And for this, I'm really going for vibrant, saturated colors. So I want to keep my pencil work clean. Now, I do have an entire series of drawing for beginners over on my YouTube channel, and a drawing for beginner mini course where I've collected all of those videos and downloadables. If you are interested in that link of the for the drawing for the total beginner mini course, send me an email. Okay, I have links to that mini course over on my website, www.ericalancaster.com. You can check it out there. But if you'd like me to send you the link to this mini course, feel free to email me. You can find me at hello@ericalancaster.com. Just tell me, please send me the link to the drawing for the total beginner mini course, which holds all of those videos so that you can get started with your drawing on the right foot. And I'd be super happy to send it to you. Okay. But if not, you'll find all of those separate videos here on my YouTube channel. And in one of them, I explain what drawing pencil grades are. All of these little symbols, they tell you how soft or how hard the graphite in the core of these pencils is. And in that video, I explain how these different grades can come in handy throughout your drawing process. Okay, so what I would recommend is using an HB pencil, but because I want you to be able to see what I'm doing as clearly as possible, I am going to be using a 2B pencil. Does that make sense? Let me check on the chat for a moment. My goodness, I need to drink more coffee. Which part of the reference is a good starting point? Gail, large to small, general towards specific. So what are the largest shapes? I'll walk you through this process in just a bit. All right, cool. And when it comes to my erasers, this is just a soft graphite eraser, a kneadable eraser. And then I have these paintbrushes on hand. I don't know if I'm going to use them all. We'll see. But this is a size 14 round brush and a size 8. I would consider these to be medium-sized brushes. And then these are smaller brushes, more for the smaller elements and details. This is a size 6, a size 3, and a size 0. Okay, you don't need to have 5 brushes with you, but as long as you have one medium-sized brush and 1 or 2 smaller brushes, I think you'd be fine for this project. Okay, great. And what else? I'm going to be using this watercolor set. This one has paint from Van Gogh in it. It's one of my favorite, more accessible or accessibly priced watercolor paint out there. Very, very good color payoff and easy to blend. So, and very accessibly priced. Okay, we're mostly going to be using a warm red. This is permanent red light. A warm yellow. This is Azo Yellow Deep. And then I'm also going to be using what else? My sap green. This is a warm green. And to darken my colors, I'm going to be using Payne's Gray, okay, which is a cooler gray. And maybe I bring in a few other colors, I don't know, but those are the main ones, okay? As long as you have something similar, warm red, which is better for Christmas in my opinion than a cool red, warm yellow, and warm green, you're gonna be great. And if you don't have a warm green, say for example, you have Viridian green, which is a cool green, just add some yellow into your green and that's gonna make it warmer, okay? There's always a way to change the color temperature of your different paint colors. As long as you know color theory, that is what's most important. And once you know color theory, you can change colors pretty easily because you understand color relationships. Okay, cool. So let me pop up this reference on screen. If you are a Patreon member in the $6 or $15 tier, you should have received the downloadable outline sketch that I sent yesterday. Yes, yesterday. At the end of the post, at the end of the reminder post that I sent for today's class, I sent you 2 different sizes of this outline drawing. So you can use whichever you prefer or transfer it if you want to skip over the freehand sketching process. All right, cool. So let me go ahead and sharpen my pencil. It's a little bit blunt. and we'll get started with the drawing process. I will be providing lots of little tips that are going to help you get proportions and shapes more similar to what you're seeing there. Okay, oh, and just as an FYI, if I didn't say this, this is a 5 by 7 inch watercolor sheet that I'm going to be working in. I thought it was a good size for a greeting card. Okay, cool. So let's jump right in. I'm going to have a sip of coffee real quick and check on questions, and then we'll jump right into this process. Okay, let's see. Okay, I seem to have no more questions or no questions so far. Cool, let's jump right in. So the very first thing that I would recommend doing is just creating like a couple of tick marks. And it's up to you to decide if you want to create your tick mark where, say, the middle of the bow starts or at the top where the tips of those leaves are. I like to, as I always say in all my drawing tutorials, work large to small, general towards specific, simplify everything that you're observing into basic shapes, and draw lightly in the beginning. Those are the 3 keys that I apply. It doesn't matter what I am drawing, okay? Large to small, large to small or general towards specific, simplify into simple shapes, and start lightly, okay? But how you decide to do that is completely up to you. The way that I am doing this is I am visualizing the middle upper edge of the middle portion of the bow, okay? And so you don't have to do this because I'm just asking you to create the tick marks right now. But this is the middle of the bow. Why did I start there? Because it's in the middle of the composition, okay? And this way, I can make sure that my little composition is centered and is located within this greeting card design where I want it, okay? My entire little illustration here, I want to take up maybe this much of my greeting card space because I want to add a little happy holidays or Merry Christmas or whatever it is message over here at the bottom. So I want my illustration to fit here, and I want it to be centered. So I need to visualize the space that I want this entire little composition to sit in. So I start by creating the little tick marks to help me understand what is the length or the height of this composition and what is the width of it, and where do I visualize it in space so that I don't end up with a drawing that is super small or super large and ends up not fitting, or too far to the left or too far to the right, okay? And visualizing the large first is going to help you do that, okay? So I always help myself with little tick marks and vertical and horizontal lines as I'm moving through this. But if this is the middle part of that little bow, right, the little ribbon here in the middle, I need to make sure that I have enough space for the leaves and the holly leaves and the other leaves that I want over here above the bow. So that is why I need to place that somewhere around here, okay? And this is not a perfect science, but this is how you develop your observational skills and your visual measuring skills so that you can improve your freehand sketching, okay? So whatever you are working on, notice if there is a middle point that you can start with, okay? And then if that's going to be the bow, right? Imagine that the left side of the bow is here and the right side or edge of the bow is here. Then the bells are going to fall somewhere, this is not perfect again, but let's just say that the bottom edge of this bell, imagine that the oval or the ellipse is somewhere around here, right? And then so this is the bottom edge that I'm referring to. And then the other curve for this bell is somewhere around here. Maybe I need a little bit more space. No, I think I'm good. Okay. So, that is important. Bottom edges, upper edges of the major masses in the little composition are important to get in. So I have the approximate height of the little composition in, and I have the approximate width of the little composition in. Approximate, okay? The leaves and all those more organic berries and stuff like that, it's easier because you can slightly change the curve of the leaf or the size of the leaf. Those smaller elements are secondary or tertiary supportive elements. Focus on the larger first, the larger masses, the larger elements, and get those in first. Does that make sense? And get the bottom and top edges in and the left and right edges in so that you can create an appropriate location of that. Okay, cool. So once you have that, let's go ahead and start building the bells. Okay, so here's the upper curve of this bell. I will be erasing some of these sections because of how the ribbons are falling over parts of the bell and stuff, but I need to visualize the structure in order to make sure that I'm drawing the bell effectively, right? And what's cool about bells is that they help us practice our 3D, three-dimensional structures, right? We're visualizing the bells as being like a almost like a cone. It's not a perfect cone, but like it has like a conical shape to it, a kind of conical structure that is open at the bottom and curved at the top, closed and curved at the top. When it comes to this spell here on the left, it's coming toward us. We see the opening of the bell, the bottom ellipse with the little, I don't know what it's called, but the thing that makes the sound. We actually see that part because the bell is turning toward us, whereas the bell on the right is turning away from us. So notice how those curves are different. The ellipse of this bell here on the left is like this, with the curve going like this, and this one as well, because they have to be cohesive. Otherwise, the structure is not going to make sense. And the curve in this spell is different. The curve in this spell is like this, right? And it's turning away from us. Notice those curves. And then once that upper edge and lower edge of the bell is making sense, you can just go ahead and close it. This one is in front of the other one, slightly covering it. So I'm just going to go like this. And then I'm going to do another curve following the same curve, right? Making a little kind of tapered end, right? And then this one, I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to follow this bottom curve. Make sure that your perspective is consistent. Otherwise, 3D form and perspective, I tell you how to start with those important drawing fundamentals and the Drawing for the Total Beginner mini course. But they are essentials to draw anything. 3D form and perspective are present everywhere in our day-to-day life. It doesn't matter what it is that you try to draw. I'm going to erase this just a bit. Doesn't matter what it is that you're trying to draw, form and perspective are drawing fundamentals. Okay? All right, so those are the two bells, and I think I could have taken a little bit more space, but it's totally okay. I think my handwritten lettering that I'm going to add will be somewhere around here. But if you find your bells are a little bit too small or a little bit too big, if you want to make them larger, sometimes it's just a matter of, creating, elongating, or just, making a second line right alongside your bottom edge or your right or left edge, if it's the width that you want to manipulate, and then just make that element a little bit larger. I don't like to do I don't like to dust off my eraser bits with my hands, because any oils I have on my hands are going to stay on my watercolor sheet, and that can make my paint application splotchy and stuff. So I would rather use my dry absorbent towel to dust off those eraser bits. See how I made my bell here on the right just a little bit taller just by creating a second curve here right alongside my previous curve and just erasing the previous one. It's relatively easy once your structure is looking okay to make things a little bit wider, a little bit taller, but make sure that you're drawing lightly. Otherwise, it's going to be hard to erase. Okay. So once your bells are looking okay and they transmit a sense of 3D form and perspective, let's go ahead and start with the other elements. The other elements are easier to draw because form and perspective aren't as important because they are more organic elements. These are man-made structures. The others are organic elements with a lot more imperfection, irregularity. They are a little bit flatter, stuff like that. Okay? Cool. So now let me continue with the bow. So this bow has this little section like that. It does have this bottom ellipse to it. Kind of an ellipse. It's not a perfect ellipse because, again, it's fabric, so it folds. Fabric is weird because, yes, it is man-made, but I approach it more as if it were organic, like an organic element because of all of the folds, the way it folds and all that. It behaves more like an organic object. But that little, just by adding a sense of the inner planes of the ribbon present in that bow, I've already created more of a believable three-dimensionality to it, as opposed to just because I could have just drawn these three shapes, and people will understand it as a bow. But when you start adding in the inner planes or other planes, it starts looking more 3D. Okay, cool. So once you have this, then we have to draw the little sections of the ribbon coming down from there. And as I said, I will be erasing the parts of the bell that wouldn't actually be visible because the ribbon is covering them up. And you can do a little bit of design work here. Your ribbon doesn't have to be exactly the same as mine, exactly the same length and covering exactly the same sections of the bell. You can make them longer if you wish to. You can make them shorter if you wish to. You can slant them off in slightly different directions, as long as you are thinking of the composition as a whole. And what I mean is the balance of it, uh, making sure that you're adding to the composition and not distracting from the focal point, or, well, this entire thing is the focal point in this case, this entire little illustration. But when it comes to composition, you want to think of the whole, of keeping a balanced little scene or arrangement, and making sure that you're making it interesting, that you're thinking of the viewer's eyes and keeping them flowing throughout the piece. All those things are important. Okay, so moving on from here, I'm going to add a little extra section, two extra sections of ribbon here. It's like a double bow. I don't know what you call them, but you know what I mean. It's kind of those bows where you see a double, kind of like that. Let's see if I have any questions. Carol, you're not receiving anything from Patreon. Did you check on my email that I sent you a bit ago? I sent you the instructions so that you can check to see if your email notifications are toggled on. Please make sure to check on that, and also make sure to check on the how to use Patreon video, because you are in full control of what emails you receive as a Patreon member, and if your notifications are turned off, you won't be receiving them. Okay, so just fixing a few little sections here, making sure that all of those overlapping shapes are making sense. And then from here, I'm going to start, like, I ask myself, what is the next element in terms of size? Okay, I would say when it comes to this little composition, the bells are the largest, the bow is the second largest, and then what's next are the leaves, the holly leaves, not the other leaves. Okay, so the holly leaves. Let me go ahead and show you a little tip when it comes to holly leaves. Okay? Move this away for a second. What I do with a holly leaf is I start with the middle vein, because having my middle vein in is going to help me arrive at, not that holly leaves are perfectly symmetrical, because nothing natural and organic is perfectly symmetrical, but having the middle vein in is going to help you arrive at something that looks more symmetrical. There is a certain symmetry level to leaves, to our faces. Even though our faces are not 100% symmetrical, when we're drawing a face, we do want to make it seem like both halves of the face belong to the same person, right? It's the same thing with leaves. There can be slight irregularities and imperfections in that symmetry, but you want the shape overall for the leaf to look. Let me go ahead and use a darker pencil grade or a softer pencil grade so that you can see what I'm doing. You want the leaf as a whole to look relatively symmetrical and not lopsided. So starting with that middle vein is helpful. And then once you have that middle vein, you can start with your curves on either side. A curve on the left, and then a curve on the right. A curve on the left, a curve on the right. A curve on the left, a curve on the right. And then I need to close this leaf. There is no specific number of curves you have to make, because it varies from leaf to leaf or plant to plant. But do make sure that you have the same amount of curves on one side and the other side. And then you kind of bring it in at the bottom, just like it is at the top, so that you can close the leaf like that. So that is essentially the shape of a holly leaf. You can add a little extra curve here, there is no specific number of curves as long as it's relatively close to this. One or two more curves, one or two more or minus curves, you're going to end up with something that looks like a holly leaf. If you hear my cat, she's outside. Okay, so hope that makes sense, but that is essentially the idea that I have in my head as I'm drawing these leaves. And so let's just say I'm going to start with this one here. So start with the middle vein and then build the leaf to the left and to the right of that. See how I started with the curve on the left, and then I'm doing the curve on the right. And then I create another curve on the left, and then I create another curve on the right. Curve on the left. These would be hidden, so I'm not going to do those, but that's the idea. Checking on questions. Does that make sense? Let me do another one. Okay. So middle vein, and then curve on the left, curve on the right, curve on the left, curve on the right, and then these would be hidden, so I'm going to stop there, but I'm going to continue doing the curves on the right. Okay, and then I'm going to close here. And again, you can slightly shift the angle of these leaves. When you first draw the middle vein, think of the angle that would make more sense for how your composition is looking. Because maybe in your case, your bow is a little bit different from mine. And you have to think of tilting the leaf in a slightly different way would make more sense for you, and that's fine. Start developing your eye for composition, right? I always like encouraging you guys to create asymmetrical balance as a whole in your whole composition, right? Why? Because having too much symmetry in a composition will make it boring, right? What is symmetry? Symmetry is when the two left and right halves of your composition are exactly the same. So like a mirror, right? You want your composition to appear balanced, like the visual weight in the left and right halves of your composition, they have the same weight, but play with your elements and also with the color and the amount of texture and contrast that we're going to be building, so that your composition at the end is not symmetrical, but it looks balanced. And that is exactly why, if you notice, I placed 3 holly leaves over here and 2 holly leaves over here, and I played with the positioning of the bells so that they are asymmetrical. One is lower than the other one. And then also the positioning of the evergreen leaves. Is that the proper term? I'm not quite sure. But the other leaves are also not placed exactly the same. And the berries as well, I created asymmetry within this composition. Okay. Hi, Paul. Nice to see you. In your supply list, you mentioned soft graphite eraser. What eraser is considered that description? Great question, Carol. Thanks so much for asking it. So I'm sure you've seen those plasticky hard erasers. I don't know if you've ever had this experience, Carol, but you're erasing something with a hard plasticky vinyl eraser, and it damages and rips your paper, and it doesn't really erase the graphite very well. Those are the kinds of erasers that I just don't use for drawing. If I had to choose an eraser for drawing, and this is not even as soft as it gets, I really enjoy the erasers. They're gum erasers where you're erasing and the eraser crumbles a bit. And that annoys a lot of people, and that's why they don't like those erasers. But I like them because since I work on watercolor paper a lot of the time, I don't want to damage my watercolor paper. I would rather have some of that crumbling and just dust it off and have a intact watercolor sheet. So those are gum erasers, Carol. And then this is kind of something in between where it's soft, it's not plasticky. I mean, it has the color of a plasticky eraser, but it's a lot softer than those. It's a little bit more crumbly. But I really like erasers from, let me show you. Hold on. This is my favorite eraser brand, and I get them via Amazon or Blick. Hold on. These General's erasers. And so these I would consider soft graphite erasers, right? I love how they smell. It's like a drug to me. I don't know why I love how they smell this much, but this is what I call a soft graphite eraser. They crumble a little bit more. I did really like what are they called? Dust-free erasers from Stadler, I think they are. I got those on Amazon a few times. And I really like those too. So I would recommend those, but I hope that makes sense. These, what do they say they are? Hold on. Yeah, so I don't know. I think I accidentally removed a section there, but this just says they're like gum erasers. Okay? I hope that that's helpful for you, Carol. But I think it's easy to tell when like it's for me it's easy to tell when the eraser is very hard and plasticky. When I have a hard plastic eraser in my hand, I know not to use it, especially not on watercolor paper. Sure. Awesome. Yeah, Generals is a brand that you can get pretty much anywhere. It's very, what's it called? Not popular, not common. What's the word that I'm looking for? Well known, and many stores carry it. So I think you'll find it easily if you don't have it, if someone else is looking for a great eraser. So I'm going to start with this leaf here. Same thing. I started with the middle vein, working on the left side. Left curve, right curve, left curve, right curve. And then I'm gonna do another one coming down like this. Try to vary the sizes as well of those leaves. Make those leaves slightly different in size from one another. Vary the angle, vary the size, so that you have some variety in your composition to make it interesting. Left curve, right curve. Left curve, right curve. And there you go. That's another little holly leaf. And then here I'm missing one more. I'm gonna create that middle vein first, going like that. And then curve on the left, curve on the right. Curve on the left, curve on the right, left, and right. Help you keep that symmetry. And then from here, I'm gonna move on to the more like the fill-in. You know, if you have a bouquet of flowers, you know how you have your main flowers, then you have your smaller, medium-sized flowers, and then you have your filler. Well, the same thing is happening here. We have the main things and the secondary things in, and now the evergreen leaves or whatever they are called, that would be the filler. So that you would build the filler around the most important elements in a way that makes sense. And as I said, most likely than not, your drawing has some slight differences from mine already because we've been working on this freehand, right? That's great. Just consider what you already have and then try to see where it would make sense for you to add in those final filler elements. And these final evergreen leaves, you guys, by the way, you don't really have to draw them. I'm going to draw them so that you can see them. But these final leaves, especially, you're just going to be painting in with your paintbrush and paint like little lines. You know, you're not even going to be filling in shapes like we do with the other elements. These filler evergreen leaves, you're just going to be painting with little brushstrokes, like lines, if you will. Okay. So, in some cases, when it comes to something like this, I would just add like the middle line, and then I have that to visualize the rest of the leaf, and then I just paint the rest of the leaf, the smaller marks coming out of that central line. I just paint them in freely. Does that make sense? In this case, as you can see, I ended up with more space here than in the original outline sketch. So it would make more sense for me to create another evergreen leaf kind of somewhere around here instead of forcing what I'm seeing in the reference and trying to add both of these evergreens here. I'm just going to add it over here and change the composition just a little bit. That is a kind of decision making that we make as artists. Even when we're using reference photos, we're using them as a jump off point, right? We're not really trying to copy the reference photo as is. We're designing as we go to make something look even nicer or to make it work in drawing or painting form. And maybe I add in just one evergreen leaf over here. And there you go. That's the right half of my composition kind of finished. And then I'm going to add the evergreen leaves over here. Now, let me see if I have any questions. It's hard to get the leaves to feel like they are large enough. Barb, are you making your holly leaves too small, Barb, in relation to everything else that you have in your little composition? Let me know. Sometimes, Barb, it's a good idea to practice the specific element you're having issues with separately in a separate sheet of drawing paper or a sketchbook or something like that. And once you're a little bit more confident with the shape, it's likely that you'll be able to draw it larger, because sometimes we start drawing too small, or we're not confident in our ability to draw the shape, and so we do it very small. But what I like reminding students of is that oftentimes you make the process harder for yourself if you make things too small. So it's good to practice drawing larger. And my final little evergreen leaf is going to come up this way because it just makes sense for this composition. I'm sorry, I'm repeating the word composition too much, but it's just so important. And I think many artists who are sharing tutorials online just don't emphasize the importance of composition enough. And it's something that I really like reminding people of, especially those of you who are interested in creating original compositions that look balanced and aesthetic. Okay, so for this one, we do see that little thing at the bottom. So I'm going to add it in. And then the final filler element would just be the berries. And the berries, I want you to add in intuitively based on what you see in your drawing so far, because these final filler elements should add a little extra points of interest and a little bit more filling, like a more complete look. But they're an extra and they should work with what you already have. So if you have any spaces where you feel the berries would look best, add those in there and don't go overboard. A few go a long way. I like when it comes to the berries and the smallest little details, I also like bringing in variety. And with variety, I mean cluster them together in different ways, meaning sometimes have pairs of two, sometimes have like three, four, sometimes, like make sure that you're staying away from patterns. And sometimes you may want to overlap your berries. I think those are enough. And now, when it comes to the final little message down here at the bottom, if you have a ruler, use a ruler, or any straight edge that you can use to make a couple of straight lines down here. And you can add whatever message you'd like. We're going to do this at the end of the process. Whether it's Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever you would like, okay? I want to leave that open to you. And also, if your drawing ended up being taller than mine and you want to add your message in one single line, you can do that as well. Just bring down the line a little bit lower and do it just in one line. I'm going to do Happy Holidays in 2 lines, so I needed 2, okay? And that's all. I'm going to give you a couple of extra minutes, going to have a few sips of coffee, and then we're going to move on to the next phase of this process, which is the pen and ink. Let me see if I have any questions. How are you guys doing? Is it super cold where you live? It's not really cold here yet. You're very welcome. Okay, let's see if I have any. Okay, I'm gonna close this because it's just this is just distracting me, so I'm gonna close it. Okay, gonna give you a couple more minutes. Your drawing, I like reminding students that you need to like your drawing because this is the foundation for everything else. No amount of detail or color or value or shading or whatever you do is going to fix a faulty foundation. Okay, so spend as long as you need to it with your drawing. Make sure that you like it, make sure that it looks like it's balanced. And then if certain important factors such as 3D form and perspective, if you're drawing like a house or even a still life arrangement where form and perspective are very important, you want to make sure that those look believable and consistent throughout the piece before moving forward. Because, as I said, no amount of detail, shading, color is going to fix something like that. Oh, I think I missed a couple of little lines in the bow here and here. Just little fabric folds. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm always happy to help. Let's see. Filler stems. Bells need work. Something to practice on. Quiet mornings. I love that, Carol. Yes. You know, a while back, I created this video, and it's over on my YouTube channel and over on Patreon as well, where I explain the difference between drawing man-made objects and organic objects, and how we kind of we need to make that mental switch, because when it comes to man-made objects, these are more perfect symmetrical forms or combinations of forms, whereas with organic objects and fabric as well, there is more regularity and asymmetry to them. So usually we either have we have stronger man-made object abilities when we draw, or stronger organic object abilities when we draw. And for me, it was the organic objects, because for me it's harder to visualize those as solid forms because of all of that irregularity. But I've developed that skill over time to be able to simplify. When you're drawing flowers or trees, seeing the bulk of the leaf portion of the tree as a solid structure before moving on to visualizing the clusters of leaves and the individual leaves and stuff like that, for me, that's harder. However, when it comes to organic objects, there is a greater leeway, a greater margin of error, because when you're drawing a tree or a cloud or a rock or a flower, as long as the major characteristics and the major forms make sense, you transmit a sense of form. Your petals can be a little bit wider or a little bit taller, or proportions don't have to be exactly the same for it to look like a tree, because it's a natural object. But when it comes to man-made objects, oftentimes it's harder because proportions do need to be a little bit more correct. Like, say you're drawing a house, the size of the door and the windows needs to make sense in relation with everything else, because a person has to fit through that door. And if you're doing a 2-story house, a 3-story house, or whatever it might be, you need to consider the height of each story of the house when you're drawing all of those architectural elements. So you need to pay attention to proportions more kind of strictly, I guess you could say, when you compare it to organic objects. Same thing with faces. Anatomy is interesting because we are organic. We are natural organic beings. We're not objects that are man-made. However, there is a certain symmetry to us, at least in the outside. And when you're drawing a face or something like that, proportions are very important. I mean, faces are what we look at most as human beings, and even someone who hasn't studied facial proportions is going to know when something looks off because they see faces so much throughout their day-to-day lives. um, Someone is going to be able to tell like there's something weird with those eyes, or the nose looks a little bit off, but even if they cannot tell you exactly what it is. So faces are weird in that way, in that we are not man-made objects, but proportions are also very, very important if you're looking for more realistic results, which is why anatomy is so like advanced. Okay, so now that I've given you a little bit more time to work on your drawing, let's move on to the pen and ink. I'm going to get started. I have many pen and ink tutorials and tips videos on my channel, but it is important to keep your ink flowing. So keep your hand and your arm moving as you go. Why? Because if you are doing this too slowly and you're focusing too much on achieving perfect lines and stuff like that, you're going to arrive at stop and start marks, little dots throughout your lines because your ink flows down. Your ink is flowing. And if you stop, it's going to flow down and it's going to create a little dot in that spot. Okay? So you want to keep your hand moving. It doesn't have to be fast, but keep it moving. Okay? Don't stop. And I was going to say something else. I forgot. I will come back to it later. But yeah, you want to keep it moving and also make sure that you are, like, for example, if I start here, hold on. I'm not going to draw that little section of the bell because the ribbon is over that section. So I am not going to trace over that because the ribbon is covering that up, right? So as you're working, make sure that you're accounting for overlapping elements that are slightly covering each other up. I don't want to trace over that part of the bell because that's not visible, right? Be careful with those things because this is permanent. You're not going to be able to erase it. And I've never had issues with these pens. The ink dries pretty quickly. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. If you move too slowly, also, aside from the fact that you're going to arrive at these stop and start marks, um, your lines are going to end up looking a lot stiffer than what they would if you just keep it moving. So it is better to have some imperfections, wobbles, even some little like crooked lines, whatever it is. That is better than having super perfect stiff lines. Okay? Gonna continue. I try to start with the largest elements, but sometimes when you're working with pen and ink, you have to like bounce around because you don't want to like place your hand over a section that you just drew on so that you can allow that ink to dry. Okay, this side. Very, very important to use a permanent smudge-proof pen when you're going to be bringing in watercolor or other painting mediums. I really enjoy 3 pens, but these Unipin fine liners I've been using a lot in the last couple of years. But my favorites are, of course, Micron pens from Sakura. And I also like the pigment liners from Stadler. Those are also very good. And the evergreen leaves. Oh no. Evergreen leaves are optional. If you want to trace over them, you can. But if, as I said before, if you want to do them just in watercolor, that's also a great option. I think I'm going to trace over them in pen and ink. And then maybe just add a little bit of green on top with the watercolor, because I already traced over one section here. It's up to you. I think whatever will look beautiful. Especially because these evergreen leaves are more like filler, so they would look very nice if they were just done in watercolor, whereas everything else will be pen and ink and watercolor because it'll give them less visual weight if it's just watercolor. I'm always thinking of how I can play with visual weights of my different elements so that my tertiary or supportive elements don't compete with my main ones. There we go. And I forgot this little detail in the bells, which I'm going to just add in with pen and ink. A little line here at the bottom. I'm just following the curve that I already created. And that's it. I'm going to allow this to dry for just, I don't know, 2-3 minutes. Honestly, I forgot a couple of these berries. Sorry about that. I'm going to leave this to dry for a couple of minutes. I've never had an issue with smudging when I try to erase over this ink. It dries pretty quickly because I want that graphite gone. You can leave it. It's totally up to you, but I'm just going to show you what I like doing. And in the meantime, I'm going to swatch out the colors that I'm going to be using for you. And this way you can see what they look like on paper and whatever, like you can plan your colors as well that you're going to be bringing in because it's so important to do. Okay, give me just one sec. I'm going to grab a scrap piece of watercolor paper. And if you have any questions, let me know. The marker is bringing it to life. Yes. Okay. So this is a scrap piece of watercolor paper that I had in my studio. I always have scrap pieces of watercolor paper from studies for paintings that I was doing. Many times I work on paintings 2 or 3 times before filming them, especially the longer ones that I create for Patreon. So I have lots of paintings that didn't turn out cut into strips like this that I use for swatching my colors and stuff. Okay, so the red that I'm going to be using for this piece is Permanent Red Light, which is a warm red. What is a warm red? A red that is leaning more toward the orange than, say, the purple or the blue. This right here is a cool red. This is a warm red. Okay, and I would recommend checking out my videos that I have created on setting up a watercolor palette using the split primary method, which essentially just means that you have a warm and cool version of each primary. Because if you have those 6, if you start your palette with those 6, that is going to set you up for painting pretty much anything, whether it's a still life or a landscape or a portrait or whatever it is that you enjoy painting. Okay, so warmer red, and then this is a warm yellow. This is Azo Yellow Deep. You could also use something like a New Gamboge, Indian Yellow, Hansa Yellow Deep, anything like that. What is a warmer yellow? Warmer yellows lean a little bit more toward the orange than toward the green. Hold this up to the camera for you so that you can see them in better lighting. And then the green that I'm going to be using is sap green. This is a warmer green as well. A lot of people like having Viridian green in their palette because it does lend itself well for color mixing, but I don't really like Viridian green. I like warm greens, and so I usually get warm greens. In my other palette, I have Undersea Green from Daniel Smith. That is my favorite green ever. It's a very deep, rich, warm green that granulates, um, but it's a warmer green too. And then I'm going to be using a bit of Payne's Gray for darkening certain colors. And this is a line and wash piece, so I won't be going super deep on like we're just going to be painting this in one single layer as opposed to painting multiple layers, which we usually would do if we were just using watercolor. Just to clarify, there are many watercolor artists that paint in one single layer. There are others that paint in 2 layers, others that paint in 3 layers, or even more. Okay. Usually, this depends on how realistic you want the piece to look, or what is your style when it comes to realism. Okay. Usually, artists who work in one single layer are looser, more expressive, maybe even more graphic. And then artists who use more layers are usually trying to push the realism, allowing layers to dry in between. And I have video tutorials where I explain my layering process. However, today we're doing line and wash, which is a mixed media technique, right? Mixed media means you're bringing in more than one single medium. So what happens with mixed media pieces is that you have to be careful not to overdo it with all of the mediums that you're bringing in, because if you do, you're going to end up with a very overworked piece that lacks that freshness and even that glow that we're looking for when working with watercolor. So when I personally work on line and wash pieces, usually I do one single layer because I've already did some description with the ink. Sometimes I even do some alternative shading with the pen and ink, right? And so if I already did alternative shading with the pen and ink, which I didn't do here, but if I had added in some cross hatching or contour lines or stippling or whatever it is, I'm not going to be shading with the watercolor too, because that's going to be too much, right? So I do have a video where I explain my main essential tips when it comes to creating a balance when using mixed media or creating mixed media works. But I always think of how much do I want to do with the watercolor and how much do I want to do with the pen and ink, or how much do I want to do with the gouache and how much do I want to do with the watercolor, or how much do I want to do with the colored pencils and how much do I want to do with the watercolor. Like whatever you're using, ask yourself, do you want one of those mediums to be the primary medium, the star of the show? Do you want them to do 50-50? Like, and what techniques are you going to be bringing in with each so that you don't end up with something that is overly described and lacks that freshness and that expressive look that we're usually after when we're creating line and wash. Okay. So all this to say, as I'm doing my painting, which is just going to be done with one single layer, maybe I add in a tiny bit of a darker value with a second layer, but I'm going to be trying to create a bit of a range of values in one single layer. Okay, and I'm going to explain how I do this. But these are the main colors that I'm going to be bringing in. Okay. Alrighty, so by this point, the ink has completely dried. So I'm gonna go ahead and take my soft eraser and I'm just gonna go in. I like using circular motions a lot of times and just gently erasing over my line work so that my graphite is gone. I'm gonna leave my graphite down here for my message. And I'm almost done. There we go, all gone. Grab a dry towel. If you're interested, these are blue Scott absorbent towels, and I get them through Amazon or Pep Boys if I go to the US, or other car shops because they are for cars originally. But what I love about these towels, I have a little bit of graphite left here. What I love about these towels is that they are untextured. So if I have to go in the middle of the painting process to do some lifting, I can just do this, wrap it around my finger, and absorb. And because they are untextured, I won't be leaving texture on my painting. I also love that they dry so fast. So anyway, just a little aside. Okay, cool. So let's jump in. Let's paint this. Let's bring it to life. I'm going to maybe take away the bell image so that you can see how often I am swiveling my brush in my container of water and dabbing it on my absorbent towel. Water control is one of those things that is essential to develop when you're building up your skills with watercolor. And I find that a lot of times in tutorials and stuff, you don't see how often the artist is like dipping their brush in the water and dabbing and then going into their paint. But that is key to water control. Like, and you start doing this intuitively. The more you practice, you don't even notice that you're doing this. But it all comes down to developing that water control. What you need to understand is that the amount of water in your mixtures, the amount of water in your brush, and the amount of water on your paper all has an impact on the results and the effects that you're creating. Right now, my paper is dry. We're going to be working on dry paper because it's what I use when I'm working with line and wash. I just do wet on dry. But have in mind that every single time you go into your container of water, you're getting your bristles are absorbing some of that water and you're bringing out water into your color, right? And every time I dip my brush in my container, I gently go like this. I remove the excess water. Then I go into my puddle. Sometimes when I see that I have too much paint in my brush, I dab the tip, just the tip like that, on my absorbent towel to remove the excess drippage. And all of those things you're going to be developing the more you practice. But if you're just getting started, this is one of the things that made the most difference for me, is making sure that you're observing and getting a feel for how much water is in those three things: your paper, your brush, and your mixtures. Okay? Because that combination, whether you have a little bit of water on your paper, or too much water in your mixtures, too little water in your brush, that combo, however it is going to have an impact on the results. Okay? And also, you always want to make sure that you're using a proper size of brush for the area or the size of the element that you're painting. If you're using a size 3 to paint in the bell, that is too small, honestly. I like using the largest brush that I can get away with because I know that I'll be able to paint fast and arrive at looser, fresher results. This brush does not make sense for this size of shape. I'm going to have to reload 5-6 times just to cover up this shape. and everything will be drying, and I'm going to arrive at texture, splotchiness, stuff like that. This is a good size brush for the holly leaves, but not for this. When you're painting larger areas, say I was painting the background, which we're not going to be doing here, but I will be adding a background to other pieces that I will be sharing in the upcoming weeks. Remember, we have 3 more line and wash classes, guys, in the next 3 Saturdays. I would love to see you there. But if you're going to be adding a vignette or something to the background, you need a larger brush, right? So that is another skill that you need to develop when you're starting out with watercolor, is picking the appropriate tool for the job. Okay, cool. So let's jump right in. Let's start with the bells. Okay, so for the bells, I'm going to be using this warm yellow. And I'm just going to try to use a coffee consistency in all of these mixtures that I'm going to be creating for this piece. Coffee consistency, don't fret, don't get nervous. It's just like having a 50% water, 50% paint ratio, more or less, on your palette. Okay, that's really all it means. Okay, you don't want your color mixtures to be so watery that the color appears super pale when you paint. But at the same time, you don't want your color mixtures to be so dry that you're not able to load up your brush properly. If you don't have any water in your mixtures and they're super dry, they're mostly pigment and no water, you're not going to be able to load up your brush well so that you can go in and paint quickly. It's going to be, there's going to be nothing for you to grab and absorb, you know? Look at the amount of paint that I have in my brush, right? So try to use color mixtures for this piece that are approximately coffee consistency. I have another video on my channel where I explain the different consistencies and provide exercises that are great for beginners so that you can continue practicing your ability to use different consistencies or manipulate the paint to water ratios in your mixtures. But to be honest, when I learned watercolor, I did not, like, I worked on those exercises, but I was not fretting about being super, like, I didn't learn the consistencies the way that some people do, like tea and coffee and milk and cream and butter, and then making sure that I'm only using tea for this part of the process and only using butter for the, like, I did not learn watercolor in that way. Yes, I learned that in the beginning we should be using more water, and as we move on, we should be using less water, right? And I started getting a feel for uh, doing it, like just doing it is not, it's the best way to learn, and not getting overly what's the word, like, focused on the technicalities and the word and the names, the terms given to all of these consistencies. The best thing that you can do, in my opinion, is learn what happens when you use paint that has more water in it, and learn what happens when you use paint that has less water in it, more paint in it, and then understand that it's all about building that range of values, lights to darks, because you need that range of values in order for something to look like it has dimension. And how do you create lighter values? By using more water. How do you create darker values? By using more paint, less water, right? So if you build up that understanding and practice in that way, you don't really need, like, you're going to start adding more paint into your mixture when you need thicker paint, and you're going to start adding more water into your mixture when you need more water in your paint. So don't overcomplicate the learning process, is what I'm trying to say, because I see a lot of beginners spend a year just learning the consistencies, and I'm like, just paint. just paint. You're going to learn so much more in that way. Okay, bells. So for me, this is Hansa Yellow Deep, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a second color mixture. And I think a brown would be better to darken my yellow than bringing in Payne's Gray, because it's gonna change the color too much. Yellow is one of those tricky colors. When To darken the red, for example, sure, I can go with Payne's Gray. To darken the green, sure, I can go with Payne's Gray. But yellow, adding in the Payne's Gray is going to darken it too much and it's going to change the color. So to darken my yellow, I'm going to add a little bit of burnt sienna. Burnt sienna is, let me swatch this out for you. Burnt sienna is this reddish brown. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a puddle of plain warm yellow, which is Hansa Yellow Deep, and Azo Yellow Deep, I'm sorry. And then here, in the second one, I'm going to add some burnt sienna into it to get a slightly darker yellow value. And this is beautiful because it's going to help me enhance that golden look, okay? So this is the color that I get when I mix together the burnt sienna and the Azo Yellow Deep. See that beautiful color? It looks like a raw sienna or something like that, okay? Great. So now let's go ahead and start with the bells. I'm going to be using this size 8 round brush to paint the bells. It does come to a pretty fine tip. Okay. Hi, Linda, Alabama. Awesome. You're very welcome. Ellipses. Yes, ellipses are hard, Carol. Okay, awesome. So let's jump right in. So I'm going to grab a good amount of this coffee consistency Azo Yellow Deep. And what I'm going to do, let's just say that the light source is hitting these bells from the left. So I'm going to start painting on the shadow side, and maybe I even leave little like highlight sections in the bell. If you want to watch me do it first and then do it yourself, that's a great way to approach this so that you can kind of understand why I am doing what I'm doing and then do it yourself. Okay? And once you have your first color painted in, you can run your paintbrush bristles over everything gently so that it stays wet for a little bit longer. You can see that sheen, right? That means it's wet and workable. I'm going to take the second darker color and I'm going to place it in shadow areas on the right side because I decided that the light would be on the left. I'm going to develop some shadows here along the bottom, maybe under the ribbon as well. And it doesn't mean that you cannot add in any of your darker color on this side, but just make sure to add the majority of this darker color on the shadow side. And I can even add a little bit more as long as my paint is, or my paper is still wet and workable, I can continue developing the darks, right? See how I left some of that first color, the Azo Yellow Deep here, shining through without applying any of the darker color on top, so that I can develop that nice range of golden values even in one single layer, right? I'm going to paint the inner part. Now, if you're afraid of getting bleeding, I would say allow this to dry completely before painting in this ellipse opening section, because the moment that your tip of your wet brush touches the edge of the paint that is not dry, you're going to get bleeding, okay? I'm going to try to do this in a relatively controlled, I'm going to try to be careful so that that doesn't happen, but if it does, I'm okay with it because again, this style that I'm going for with the line and wash, it's not very highly realistic. Not that bleeding cannot be used for realistic paintings, but it's less controlled, okay? I'm gonna add a little bit more burnt sienna into this because this is the inner part of the bell. So it makes sense that it's a little bit darker. There is a very loud car going by. You can, at any point, add in more yellow into your mixture to make it lighter, or more burnt sienna into your mixture to make it darker at any point. Just do a little bit of lifting. What is lifting? Lifting is when you go in with a clean and only slightly damp brush and you use the paintbrush bristles as a little absorbent sponge. And you can do that with your absorbent towel as well. You can lift with your absorbent towel. Okay, I'm gonna do the same thing for the other bell, starting with my lighter color of the two. We're always working lights to darks, keeping the light source consistent. Light is coming from the left. I always start with the darker area. I always start applying my paint in the dark side. Even though I'm using the lightest color, I'm going to apply the darker color over that, or develop the darker values over that first lightest layer. This just gives me a little bit more control, because this way, when you first load your brush, that is when you have more paint in your brush, right? So that is when the color is going to look darkest, because when you just go in and apply your color after you've just loaded it, that is when the color is going to appear darker because you have more paint in your brush. So if you start by painting the darkest areas, you have a little bit more control, because that paint can expand into the lighter areas, as opposed to when you start in the lighter areas, you're going in with a loaded brush and you're maybe risking going too dark in that area right off the bat. I hope that that makes sense. But there's that like shimmer, glistening look, which means that the paper is still wet. So I can go ahead and apply my second color in shadow areas, in areas opposite to the light source. And my main objective, even though I'm not going for super high levels of realism, is to develop a range of values everywhere throughout my piece. That's it. That's all I'm going to do for that bell, because we don't have the inside showing. All right. So now I'm going to switch to my size 3 brush, and I'm going to start painting in the leaves, just so that I can give those a chance to dry before painting the bow. If I paint the red in the bow right now, I'm going to get bleeding coming in and red coming into the bells. I don't want that right now. So I'm going to start with the greens. I'm going to just create a puddle of green over here. This is sap green. Bringing down my container so that you can see how often I dip that in there. Bring a little bit more water into your, got a little bit of a splash here. Bring a little bit of water into your mixture if you feel it's too thick, okay? And once you're good, create a second version of the same green by adding a little bit of your gray into your green. That is way too much. That Payne's gray is very intense. So I'm going to add more green. So that I can have a darker green for my darker areas. Okay, slightly darker green is fine. So this is sap green on its own, and this is my darker green, okay, that has the Payne's gray in it, just so that I can add a little bit of dimension into the leaves. Okay, great. So I always go in with the first color, which is the lighted, I'm taking some of the green from the darker section. This is my lighter green, plain sap green. I have a coffee consistency, and I'm going to start with this holly leaf down here. And just painting inside that shape. And while this initial layer is still wet, you can go in and lift to lighten areas, or you can go in and darken areas. Right here under the bow, we would have a little bit of shadow, maybe. It's a little bit too dark. I'm going to take my green from this other section of my puddle. And there we go. There's one leaf. Okay, so now I completely rinsed out that dark green from my bristles, and now I'm going in with plain sap green again, which is my lighter green, and doing the same thing in this leaf down here. It's the same process I'm going to follow for all of these holly leaves. starting with the lighter green, running my paintbrush bristles over the entire shape so that it stays wet for a little bit longer. You don't want to start scrubbing, but just gently run your paintbrush bristles over the entire shape, and that can really help your paper stay wet and workable for a little bit longer. Doing a little bit of lifting here, dabbing. And that is the same process that I'm going to do for all of these leaves. Okay. Remove that dark green from my paintbrush bristles and going back in with my lighter green, that's the plain sap green. Run your paintbrush bristles over everything a couple of times, and then go in with your slightly darker green, drop it into shadow sections, just here and there to add in a little bit more dimension to your leaf. Going into the next leaf, starting with the lighter green. Make sure you completely rinse out that darker green from your bristles before going in to paint your new leaf so that you can always make sure that you're starting with the lighter green. And the final holly leaf, rinse and repeat. It's a little bit too dark. If you go in too dark accidentally right off the bat, stop what you're doing, rinse out your brush, and go in to soften with a clean brush. Just a little bit of water in your bristles, run your bristles over that area, and that's going to soften it. And then just take a lighter color and continue with what you were doing. And there you go. That's the holly leaves painted. And I'm going to start painting the first layer in the berries so that I can give those a chance to dry before painting in the bow. Okay, so I'm going to continue using my size 3 round brush. If you want to switch to a smaller brush, this is a size 0. You could use something like that for the berries because they're very small. Whatever makes sense for you. But the berries, because the berries are so small, I'm just going to be going in with the red initially and then allow that to dry completely. And if I want to develop a little bit more dimension with a second layer, I can go in with my red plus a tiny bit of Payne's gray and just darken the shadow areas. Okay. And I think it would be helpful to go in with more of a tea consistency for the berries. So all I did was pull out a little bit of pigment from my puddle onto this area of my palette and add more water into that. Okay, let's see if I have any questions. I don't seem to have questions. Okay, great. So I'm just going to go in and start painting the berries, and I'm going to try to leave a bright highlight, at least in some of these berries, by just visualizing a little, kind of a little circle on the upper left, which is where the light is coming from, and just avoiding painting that area. I'm going to hold this up to the camera in just a bit. One sec. See how light that red looks? That's intentional because this is only layer number 1, and I want to develop a couple of red values in the berries. And notice that little teeny tiny highlight shape? So I'm going to allow that to dry. Do the same thing in the other berries. It's easy to lose control in small shapes like this, but support yourself by dabbing the tip of your brush on your absorbent towel as you go. If you find you have too much water slash paint in your bristles. Absorbent towels are like the unsung hero in watercolor painting, but they are so important. So there you go. That's layer number 1. I'm going to give the leaves a bit of a chance to dry, a little bit more of a chance to dry. I can still see wetness in the last leaf that I painted in. So just in the meantime, I'm going to paint in a little bit of green in my evergreen leaves. And I'm just going to, maybe I should switch to my smallest brush. This is my size 0. And for the evergreen leaves, I'm going to use a bit of a darker green. It's a very small brush, but okay. So I'm just gonna follow the pen and ink work that I did. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm always happy to help. And if you're just joining, let me know where you're joining from. Let me know if this is your first time seeing anything of mine, or if you've joined because you've seen other videos on YouTube, or because you saw my reminder post for these live sessions on Instagram or whatever it is. Like, how did you find me? Or is this your first time coming across my resources? I would love to know. It's so interesting. And let me know where you are at currently in your journey with drawing and watercolor, because that always helps me create more resources for you. And I'm always interested in hearing from you guys. Little tapered strokes for these evergreen leaves. It's kind of cloudy outside here. It's supposed to rain later in the day. There we go. Okay, let's see if, okay, I think that's better. I just made my lamp light a little bit less intense. Hopefully it has a little bit less glare. Okay, so now I think I can paint the bow at this point. Hi, Deborah, Ohio, amazing. Hello, welcome. Oh my goodness, I forgot that I was also live streaming onto Facebook. So thank you for reminding me. Okay, so if you have any questions on anything, let me know. By this point, the leaves are already dry, so I can start painting in the first layer in the bow. And for the bow, we're going to once again create 2 versions of red. The lighter red, which is just plain warm red, whatever warm red it is that you're using, and a darker red, which has a little bit of gray in it. I am using Payne's Gray. That is a little bit too much, so I'm going to add more red, make it lighter. Okay, and you can even test out your 2 color mixtures. That's how my darker red looks. And then my lighter red, which is just plain Permanent red light looks like that. Okay. So same thing here. I'm going to go in with my plain first red, coffee consistency, and I'm just going to paint in everything at once, and then I can separate the ribbon sections with my shadow colors. Got a little bit of red going into my leaves. I'm going to lift that up. So I'm going to paint the first layer over the entire thing. And then with a second layer, I'm going to be separating out the ribbon sections by adding in some extra shadows wet on dry. We're just going to be developing a second layer for details and shadow shapes in some parts of the piece. Okay, so just filling this in quickly. I'm used to leaving little sections unpainted to help me create little highlight shapes. That is optional. Just run your bristles over the shape with a very, very small amount of water in your bristles. Otherwise, you're going to create backgrounds and splotchiness. But running your bristles over that shape a little bit more is going to help you arrive at that even sheen, which means that you can work in that section a little bit longer. And I'm going to first go in with a slightly thicker version of the plain red before using my darker red. And I'm just going to develop a bit of a darker mid-tone here and there. There you go. And then I rinse that out, and I'm going to go in with a tiny bit of my darker red and dropping that into shadow sections only. So inside the ribbon, and maybe sections where the scrunchie, I don't know how to call it, the scrunch, the folds, the scrunched sections. There you go, okay? So you can develop a little bit of depth in the bow. So think of the 3D structure of it, okay? You're not going to be able to shade something effectively if you don't see it, if you don't think of it as being in 3D. If you don't acknowledge the object or your subject as being three-dimensional, you're not going to be able to shade it effectively because you're still visualizing it as a flat shape. It's a form, it's a structure. There is overlapping there. There are planes that are facing toward the light and planes that are facing away from the light. And because I created those shadows wet into wet, I wasn't controlling it too much. It would expanded. The darks expanded into the light sections. That is normal because watercolor is always going to expand when you place it on paper that is wet. But as I said, I'm going to be creating a second layer wet on dry where I'll only be pushing the darker shadow shapes in just a bit, okay? But my intention, my objective in this first layer is to already in this first layer develop a bit of a range in values and just build on that, okay? Great, so let's do the second layer in the berries. We have a very pale red in the berries. I'm going to bring out a little bit of my red into this puddle to thicken it up. And I'm just going to be using the same red that I was using before, only slightly thicker this time, more like a milk consistency or coffee because we went in with tea. So the next step would be to develop just a darker red in the shadow areas opposite to the light source. And I'm going to soften with a clean and slightly damp brush in just a bit. Removing that paint from my paintbrush bristles, removing that excess water, and softening the edge. Okay, here, this one is very teeny tiny. You can, because I'm painting wet on dry, I'm arriving at these sharp defined edges around these darker red shapes that I am painting in. Whenever I want to go in and soften those edges, I simply remove that paint from my paintbrush bristles and I go in with a clean and slightly damp brush, remove that paint, remove excess water, and run my bristles over that edge. While it's still wet, because after it's dry, once it's dried, it's a lot harder to do. You would need to scrub. Finishing up the berries, the same technique. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm always happy to help. And the recording of this class is going to be left on here, available for everyone to enjoy on their own times. So if you want to come back to it, rewatch a certain part of the video, it'll be available for you here. Oh, and if you need the downloadable outline sketch, join my Patreon because I make it available there. Patreon members are also choosing the theme or what we are drawing and painting each Saturday. So it's lots of fun to see what it's kind of a surprise both for me and for them. Okay. So there we go. Those are the little berries. Hopefully you can see how I was very easily able to develop a little bit of a sense of 3D-ness in those berries because I created a little highlight since the first layer. And then in the second layer, I just amplified the range of values by adding in a darker red. So in other words, I have a highlight, that is value number 1. I have a very light red, value number 2, and then I have a darker red, which is value number 3. And just with those 3 values, I was able to easily create more of a sense of three-dimensional form and depth in those berries, as opposed to just painting them in with one flat red and not really trying to save any highlights at all. You don't have to save highlights in every single berry, but at least if half or most of your berries have that highlight, it's always a good idea. And it's also always a good idea to think of how you can at least develop a slight range of values everywhere in all of the elements if you're looking for a more kind of dimensional look. Let's see. My pen seems to run a bit. I used a Sharpie roller, probably not the best choice. What do you use for non-movable waterproof pen? Okay, yes. It is very, very important to use whenever you're bringing in watercolor or any painting medium. It is very important to use pens that have permanent smudge-proof ink in them. In this case, I use my Unipen fine liner. This is from Mitsubishi Pencil Co. Great to work with watercolor because, as you can see, none of it smudged or anything. Other options are Sakura Micron pens. Those are also great. And also Staedtler pigment liners. Let me show you. Those are also pens that I use. Give me one sec. Okay, here I have a couple of these. So these are my other 2 favorite options. These were my favorite for a very long time, Staedtler pigment liners. And then these are kind of my third option, Micron pens from Sakura. All of these are available on Amazon. And all of these have permanent smudge-proof ink in them. And these are all what I would refer to as technical drawing pens. This kind of tip, so not a brush tip, not anything fancy, okay? It's just a technical drawing pen. Hope that helps. Okay, awesome. So now I'm just gonna go in to push some shadow areas wet on dry, maybe add a little bit more detail, but this layer is going to be very quick, very minimal, and I'm not going to do any more work in certain elements. The leaves, I'm not going to touch anymore. They have, all of my leaves have at least a couple of green values in them. Not the evergreen leaves because those are more like lines, like single brushstrokes. But these holly leaves do have at least a couple of values in them. You can see some lighter areas and some darker areas. If I go in and try to push them more, especially because they are smaller shapes, I'm likely going to arrive at an overworked result. And when it comes to this style of artwork, line and wash, if you want to keep it fresh and loose, I would recommend just working in one layer if possible. And if you will be working in two layers, just adding in detail and contrast where you really need it. Okay. It's so easy to overwork watercolors in general, but when you're using mixed media, it's you don't really need to do too much with either medium because they're helping each other out, right? They're playing together. Okay, cool. So let's do a little bit more work in the bells. I'm just gonna show you what I would do to create a bit of a darker shadow shape here and there and add a little bit more contrast and detail. So I'm going to use my size 3 round brush just because the shapes that I am painting in are smaller shadow shapes. I'm not looking to cover up what I've already done. These are the very important lighter values. I'm just looking to create darker shadow shapes in certain sections, okay? So I created that more of that darker color that I was using for layer number 1. And I'm just going to go in, for example, right here under the bow where the bow would be creating a bit of a shadow shape on the bell. And here, and then there's a plane going by, or a helicopter or something. Painting that shadow shape wet on dry, remove that paint from my paintbrush bristles, and softening the lower edge. I'm going to soften the edges of these shadow shapes just a little bit. Don't want to overdo the softening either. Okay, let's see. I'm going to add a little shadow shape right here over this ridge. Pushing the shadows in the side opposite to the light source. So you can see how I'm painting the shadow shape. I'm removing that color from my paintbrush bristles and softening the edge. That's all I'm doing. Little bit of shadow over this ridge. Little bit of a shadow shape on this opposite side to the light source, adding a little bit more burnt sienna into my mixture. And you can see how I'm creating a bit more of a three-dimensional look. And why is this happening? It's happening because I'm expanding that range of values. Values are key to depth, okay? Maybe just a bit of a shadow shape here because we have that overlapping taking place. And that's it. That's all I'm gonna do in the bells. Don't wanna do too much, but you can definitely see how now I've added an extra pop to that 3D form, right? Okay, so a little bit more work in the bow as well, which is another of these important elements in this composition. I'm gonna add a little bit more of my permanent red light into this mix and mixing a little bit of this darker red into it had a lot of, I brought out a lot of Payne's gray before into the red over here. So this already might be enough for me to work with. I'm going to try to use this red as it is. And if it's not dark enough, I can always add a little bit more of my Payne's gray into the red. I think it's dark enough. So notice where I am painting my shadow shapes. I am painting it in the inside planes of the bow and wherever I consider overlapping to be. Wherever there is overlapping taking place, or there is something in front or above another object or element that is creating a shadow of the element underneath, like all of that is essential when you're shading, considering the three-dimensionality, considering overlapping. Where would shadows be? This is a little composition that I'm creating solely from imagination. And when you're creating from imagination, we need to, if we want to achieve any level of realism, we need to think of light behavior. We need to think of three-dimensional form, right? How do things work in real life? And that is the way that you can make something look a little bit more realistic, even though you're working completely from imagination. All right, so that is enough in the bow. If I do more, I can flatten everything out. That is it. That's all I'm going to be doing for my illustration. So now I'm going to explain what I would do if I were to add some handwritten lettering down here for my message. I'm going to go with Happy Holidays. You can do Merry Christmas or anything you'd like. Okay, I want to encourage you to use your own creativity. And if this is yours. You can do whatever you want and make it your own. Okay. Set this aside and I'm going to grab my sketchbook again so that I can explain what I like doing when I am going to be adding handwritten lettering to my illustrations or my artwork. Whenever I am drawing or painting a building facade, for example, and there is a sign in front of the little restaurant, or the name of the restaurant is in some sort of sign or something like that, I use the same method. Okay, let me grab my pencil. Where did I leave that? Here it is. Let me grab my 2B. Okay, so let's just say I want to do Happy Holidays. Okay, Happy Holidays. Let me do this again with a softer pencil grade so that you can see this better. Happy Holidays. The first thing that I do is I count the amount of letters in that title, name, whatever it is. I count the amount of letters that I'm going to be adding in. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Empty space counts as 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay? Rechecking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 14, I need 14 spaces in total. Okay? If I were doing this in one single line, which maybe I am, because now that I see it with everything painted in, I think one line could also work. I'm just going to keep it at 2 lines, I think, for this one. I don't know. Anyway, so depending on the amount of lines that you're going to be dividing your message in, let's just say I'm going to do Happy Holidays, happy on top, holidays at the bottom. I don't want this to happen on my final piece. I want my letters to be centered, right? I want my words to be centered. So how do I arrive at a centered look? Well, I need to count this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In this case, I would do 5 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8. So, in other words, what I would make sure to do is this letter in the middle, which is P, and one, two, three, the middle of this word would be in between the I and the D, would be the middle. Okay. So that means that in the center of my lines here, if I want happy at the top, I need to make sure that the P is in the center. So let's just say I'm going to do this with capitals. Okay. I start with the letter in the center. Okay. In holidays, it would be I and D, right? Because there is no, it's a even number. 8 is an even number. And so when that happens, you need to consider the two letters that are in the center, right? So that's why I added those both. And when it's an odd number, you can just do the letter in the center. Does that make sense? Math. I hate it, but it's helpful for this kind of thing to center things in space. Okay, so now I have H and A to the left of this P and P and Y to the right of this P. So I'm going to add in, I'm just going to do capital letters because I'm not a specialist with handwritten lettering or anything like that. I'll show you what I do to arrive at semi-nice looking letters. But first and foremost, just like what I did with the illustration, the first thing is making sure that size and location is what you need it to be, right? And then we can work on the next things. But size and location are essential. And for me to get size and location in, I need to do this, okay? How many letters do I have? What is the center? What is the, if I had just done it in one single line, then I would make sure that 14 divided by 2 is 7. So this, no, hold on. Here, right here would have been my halfway point, I think, right? Right in between 7 and 8 would be my halfway point. So I would have to make sure that H and O are in the middle. And then I would build this to the left and this to the right. And that is how I would make sure that I arrive at something that looks centered. Okay. What am I doing? Okay. Holidays. And S, and then ILOH. See how that is nice and centered? My letters are not perfect, but they look centered, right? And so now that I have my letters centered where I want them to be, I'm just going to use a simple approach for my handwritten lettering. As I said, I'm not a specialist in handwritten lettering, but at least this works for me. And what I like doing is, if you have beautiful script or cursive, use your own handwriting, your natural handwriting that you use. I personally have pretty ugly handwriting. So I need to think about this a little bit more, and hopefully that idea of like how to make things a little bit centered helps you, and you can kind of combine that with your own natural handwriting. But for me, I need to draw my letters, and I need to like think about it and focus. So all I did here was capital letters, normal letters. And what I do is, hold on, let me do this and I can explain in just a moment. Okay. I build a little house around my letter. See that? That's all I did. Just build that little house or box around that letter. I'm going to do that to all of my letters, and I'm going to go a little bit quiet because I really need to focus on this. Okay. There's happy. Happy is done. And now holidays. And sometimes, by the way, for the beginning of my art business, when I started my art business, is the proper way to say it, I was selling greeting cards and like stationary pieces like that in little like art events and stuff like that. And what I did was I created my illustration traditionally with watercolor or whatever I was using. I took a photo or scanned it depending on the piece, and then I added my lettering digitally in Photoshop. And that's another way to do it, which simplifies this process. You don't have to do it by hand unless you want to, or you have beautiful handwriting. And then I took my designs um, with my artwork or my entire design all prepared in the size that I wanted my prints to be to a print shop. And I had a ton of greeting cards or whatever it was printed, and then I sold them. And I always kept a few to give them away during Christmas to my family and friends. But I just wanted to get that out there because this kind of thing can also be done digitally with the beautiful fonts that you have access to. Okay, so there you go. Now I have my centered letters, and I do erase my pencil work that I have there. I would allow things to dry for a little bit longer, but whenever you're ready to erase, you can erase. And sometimes I like filling in the letters as well with my ink or even watercolor or gouache or anything else if you want to fill in those letters. I'm going to use this other pen, show you what that looks like. So we're almost done with this piece, and I really, really hope that you enjoyed this class. I am looking forward to sharing another 3 classes with you in the upcoming Saturdays, same time. Um, and spending some time with you and working on art together. Let's see. Let me know how this went for you, if you struggled with anything. If you're a Patreon member, let me know if you have any other ideas that you would like to see in the upcoming polls. Polls. I said that weird. And I would love to consider them. And I'm sure that if you follow all of these sessions, you will be starting off the year right with more confidence in your freehand sketching skills and also more confidence in your watercolor. So do stay tuned, and I'd love to have you join us for upcoming sessions. And if for some reason you can't make it to the live session, no worries, because the recordings will always be available for you here and you can enjoy them in your own time. Sometimes I like filling in one letter and then leaving the next one empty and then filling the next and then leaving the next one empty. I do that sometimes. Let me know if you have any final questions because I'm about to leave you guys. And I want to make sure that I answer all your questions before leaving. And feel free to ask me questions on anything art related, whether it's supplies or techniques or productivity or um, mindset related, art business related, anything. I'm always happy to help. All right, all done. Where's my paint palette? Here it is. Arizona. Hey, James. Okay, let me move on over here again. Closer to my computer. Let's see. Okay. Oh my goodness, I look like a crazy person. Well, I am a little bit crazy. Crazy people are the best people. Getting settled in for the winter. Oh my goodness. Is it super cold there already? Or is it just starting to get cold? Southern California. Cool. I'm trying to mirror on my TV. Oh my goodness, that's awesome. Shout out to Southern California. It would be helpful to add the brush types and sizes needed as well as a paint palette to the supply list. Paint palette. What do you mean with paint palette? As well as a paint palette. Oh, do you mean the specific colors? I'll make sure to add that. I think I did add some. You want the specific brush sizes that I'm using and the specific colors. Is that correct? Let me make a note of that. Hey, Barb. I'm so happy to hear that you enjoyed this. Let's see. Oh my goodness, Wisconsin. Yeah, that would be pretty cold up there. Um, all Nick's taken. Thank you for coming. I'm super glad it was helpful. Uh, okay, Barb, yes, this will be available for you and you can just enjoy it on your own time. And what's cool is that you can always pause, rewind, or go back in the video and watch as many times as you need to. Yes, colors too, but I was referring to the plastic palette to mix your paints on. Did no think ahead and at last minute grab my plastic egg tray. Oh, okay. Okay. So you mean okay. So because in my head my paint palette has mixing areas, I didn't see those as separate things. But you're totally right because many people maybe don't work with a palette like this. For a long time, what I did was I used either paint. Some people use paint straight out from the tube as they're painting, like freshly squeezed out paint. Um, and in that case, you do need to like account for a separate mixing palette. And for a long time as well, I personally used pans, like separate pans. And in those cases, I did need a separate palette as well. So I'll make sure to add that to the list. Thank you so much. Palette, mixing palette. Okay, let's see. Thinking I'm gonna grab plastic egg tray. Did it work? Did the plastic egg tray work? I used a ceramic plate for a very long time from my kitchen, like an old plate. I like how you textured the leaves. Thanks, James. I appreciate it. Watched you before. You are an excellent teacher. You're very kind, Barb. Thank you so much. The live announcement, I think, on Facebook. Thank you for letting me know where you saw the announcement. And if there's anyone here still in the live stream that is a Patreon member, and for some reason you didn't receive the notification that I sent 10 minutes like at like 10:50 my time, 10 minutes before the live class, please email me because it probably means that your email notifications are not turned on and that is done via your Patreon user backend. Patreon is awesome because you're in full control of the emails that you receive. And I know that a lot of people get overwhelmed with the amount of emails coming into their inboxes every single day. And what's cool is that on Patreon, you have full control of the emails that you receive. But as a creator, like you should be receiving at least 2 email notifications every week because every week I'm posting on Patreon several posts, right? And of course, depending on the tier that you're in, the $1 tier, right now I have a $1 tier, but it's probably not going to be there for very long. If you're in the $6 tier or the $15 tier, you get email notifications for the posts shared with your tier that you have access to whenever I post them. Okay. And if you have your email notifications turned off, then you're not going to receive them. And another reason why sometimes you don't see them is because maybe they're going into the spam folder, which in that case, if that's the issue, you need to go into your spam folder and whitelist me, right? Because otherwise they're going to keep going into your spam folder. So please, if you're having issues with any of that, Make sure that you watch the how to use Patreon video that I send you when you first come into Patreon, because a lot of people don't see it, and I make sure that it's super thorough and that I explain everything. And two, if you still have any issues, email me, and I'm always super happy to help you out with whatever you might need. Okay, I prioritize Patreon members' emails and messages, and I always make sure to get back to you as soon as I can. Okay, let's see. I have a porcelain watercolor palette but could not find it. Yes, yes. Sometimes I use palettes like that when I am teaching class, because oftentimes when, like, this is the kind of palette I use when I'm working on personal pieces, but when I am teaching class, especially for beginners, if I am using something like this, I like to clean it out, because I want you to see exactly like what each color looks like. I know that when artists are more advanced, they can have tons of color on their palette and they're using muted colors, and colors are intermixing and you can't really understand what's going on as a beginner. So I really try to clean everything out and really swatch everything out for you so that you can understand what colors are we're using. But in other cases, I do use the kind of palette where there are wells and each color is like each puddle is separate from each other. I think many times as a beginner that can be helpful, because otherwise, if you're still lacking water control and brush control and you have to manage puddles, which when you're using something like this, puddles seep into each other very easily. It can be a little bit too much when you're just getting started, and I understand that. So yeah, I have some of those here in my studio, and sometimes I use them. Yep. Any last questions that I can help out with before leaving you for today? I really hope that this was helpful. I hope that this was fun. And as I said, I am creating, or I'm making these videos available for everyone. This is like the second or third year that I do this, near the end of the year, because um, creating art and teaching is what I do best. It's what I have expertise in. As I always say, everything else I do badly, or I'm pretty mediocre at everything else, but with art and teaching, it's what I like to do. And so it's what I like to share, and how I like, I guess, bringing value to the world. And so uh thankfully this is what I now do full time. And I'm so grateful for everyone that is either part of my free communities, whether you are a subscriber on YouTube, or you are a Patreon member, or you have bought any of my courses. You are all so special to me. You are why I am able to do this for a living, and why I'm not still stuck in a regular job, which I did for many, many years and I was miserable. um, so it's my way to thank you, because this is what I know to do, right? And it's how I like bringing my own light into the world. And I think every single person has their own thing, their own valuable thing that they bring to the world. Everyone has it, and you just have to find it. And I'm so grateful for all of you. So I seem to have no more questions. Anyway, I hope that this was fun and helpful for everyone, and I look forward to seeing some of you next Saturday, same time. We still have 3 more line and wash classes. I'm excited to see which topic wins next week, and I will be by the way, there's a free tier on my Patreon. You can join my Patreon for free. And it's very likely, because my Patreon members are the ones who I'm most in contact with. And you get to know like what I'm working on behind the scenes, what is coming up. And like, you are the ones who get notified first of everything that I create. And so if you're interested in all of that and you want to know what is coming up, it's very likely that you're going to find out more if you join my Patreon, even if it's just the free tier. Um, I would love to see you over there. But anyway, excited about next Saturday. Hope that you join us. And by the way, if you have any friends or any family members who you think would enjoy these sessions, pretty please let them know. I would love to have them here as well. And I love connecting with you all. Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope to see you later. And I just wish you a wonderful holiday season. Have some great relaxing time for yourself. Spend some time with your loved ones or whatever it is that you do at this time of the year to unwind, to celebrate, to plan for next year. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here, for joining my communities. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. And that's it. Thanks so much, you guys.